Hello. And I always want to say like good morning or good afternoon or good whatever part of the day it is. But I know really people end up watching from so many different places in the world that it's hard to know what good to wish you. But I wish for you good whatever part of the day it is for you. And welcome. I see little faces popping up, and hi Flora. Your names, it's always lovely. So almost didn't do a live today. I was kind of I don't know, I'm in a little bit of a mood, so be forewarned. I guess. And I'm going to try to keep it a little bit short today so I can hop on a call actually with a couple people who are helping me, which is really exciting. So the general context I always like to set, so welcome as I see you joining, is please, as I'm talking, or even just what the title inspires or evokes in you, is always really welcome your personal shares or any questions that you have. Those are often, even if I get on tangents, they're often my favorite moments, because it's the real stuff. It's not just like, stuff is kind of interesting in the abstract, but it's really most interesting to me when it's about, how does it actually affect me, or how does it actually affect you? And so please bring it. And I wanted to talk about this for a couple of reasons. This idea, I always have to come up with some catchy title, so I just called it Trusting Life, and then it's like a little bit of a joke. This like, why am I so goddamn happy? And it's I say it a little bit tongue in cheek, even on this call. I just said like I'm in kind of a mood, and it's certainly not to say that life doesn't happen, or I don't have feelings, or that it's always like positive. But I was driving the other day. And I don't remember now exactly actually what happened, but I remember like something happened, or someone cut me off, or someone didn't use a turn signal, or like, it's just someone blah, blah, blah did something. And my first response was to imagine they had a good reason. And I caught myself doing it. And I think what's noteworthy about that for me is that I wasn't always like that. I think, frankly, I'm actually quite predisposed to be very judgmental of myself and very judgmental of other people. And it really, in my life, that has led to a lot of suffering. And so it was noteworthy to actually catch that like I have this new habit. Oh, you think you do the one, Flora? We have to talk again about this. Yeah, Flora just said she does she's a one, which is in the Enneagram, and I do the one on the Enneagram. I'm very and the one, for those of you who aren't familiar with the Enneagram, is it's the perfectionist. It's also the righteous crusader. So there can be a real tendency to judgment, and there's an enormous amount of self-judgment that comes with kind of your average to less healthy ones. Anyway, like where that can go is really in this sense of righteousness or discernment, and I don't want to get totally sidetracked by the Enneagram piece of it, but I noticed that I have actually trained myself, and I was really trying to, partly I kind of dropped in and I was like, well, how have I done this? Like, how have I actually trained myself to a lot of the time now have a different response? And I found that I have it towards myself as well. Like I did a podcast today, and I wasn't sure I really did a good job. And I could watch that happen. Like, oh, I wish I'd said that more clearly. I really wish I'd brought this part in sooner. And at the same time, it just wasn't debilitating in the way that it has been in the past. So for any of you who are like, it just isn't resonating, or it's not, like, I'm just like, bless you for not having debilitating self-judgment. I'm so glad. And then also this piece of, it also wasn't, even though my criticism of myself has always been much bigger, there's this way that also, like, I just used to, like, I would get kind of irritated in traffic, or it was like, why are they being stupid? Or there was just kind of like a chronic way that it was easy for me to look at what wasn't right in the world, and I pretty much always knew how it could be better. And I just started to really notice, like, wow, I have created a new habit, which is around actually imagining they have a good reason. And I think it has created a lot more happiness inside me. So there's a few ways I think I've done that. And then there's kind of this other piece that I actually want to put in, which maybe has more to do with trusting life. But even this, to me, is this sense of, I'll say honestly, I don't actually believe that life is conspiring for me, like things are happening for my benefit. But neither do I believe that they're conspiring against me. And I have a sense, like, I really do believe that there's a sense I have that life is neutral and I experience it positively. And that requires it does require looking for the good. But one of the reasons that I actually wanted to talk about this is that really positive people kind of drive me nuts. Like, there's some of the hard, like, people who are like, look on the bright side, or I regret nothing, or everything happens for a reason, or I'm just like, I don't know that that's true. And I frankly don't really experience life that way. And so I think I wanted to add what I see as like a twist to this conversation that's not just about positive thinking. But there is this side that I want to say that I do think that it requires that I look for the good. And part of where I think this has come from is having children. And they just do such, like, all kinds of weird things. But because I love them, first of all, I'm kind of like, whatever, just like go on with your weird self. Like, I find, this morning I found a bowl that had a bunch of plastic beads and water in it in the bathroom. I'm like, I don't even need to know. Like, just gonna leave that there. And the other is that I see the way that they make decisions, and that positive intentions don't always display positively. So there's sort of one side that I think comes from watching my children and really attempting to bring what I would call neutral mind. It's not even necessarily looking for the good, but like a neutral mind to them that has allowed me to do that with other people. The other is that I've had these experiences. This is what I was about to say before. And one of them actually happened quite a long time ago. But my then husband was in a motorcycle accident, and I was pregnant. So this must have been about 9 years ago. Scared the Jesus out of me. I didn't know what happened. I got a call. He'd had to go in an ambulance. He was in the hospital. And for those of you who've been pregnant, it was just like extra sensitive. So not only was it my husband, and I didn't really know what was going on, but I felt very extra sensitive and just protective, right, to our family that was being created. And there are a lot of layers to this, but the big one that happened for me was that his motorcycle had been left where the accident was. And then he had been taken, and I couldn't move it. I didn't know how. And so we called a friend of ours who knew how to ride motorcycles, and I needed to get him the key to the motorcycle. So he said yes. He was out to dinner with his girlfriend, and I was in such a state that I drove to where he was, and I thought I'll just double park for a minute. Like, I know that's not okay, but it's also not that big a deal. I'm literally going to run in and give the key. I did. I ran back out, and this was in San Francisco, and there were all these people yelling and honking, and I was kind of like, what is going on? And I realized that I had not just double parked, but I had parked where the bus line that goes on rails, I don't know what that's called, but the bus line that goes on rails in San Francisco, I had parked on the rails. And there was a bus that was up there and stopped at the bus stop and couldn't come any further because my car was blocking it. And there were all these people down at the next bus stop who were like so upset because their bus couldn't pick them up. And anyway, long story long, I was super flustered, drove away, that happened. But ever since then, I mean, that has stuck with me. And ever since then, whenever I see somebody do something that I think is just incredibly stupid, I think, what if their husband is in the hospital? And, 9 times out of 10, they're probably not. Like, there are, like, I do stupid things, you do stupid things. There's just lots of stupid people in the world. But it changes my whole experience at the moment. And this is a little, I'm worried, like, my parents are going to see this and they're going to hear me say this, but I was driving with my dad and my stepmom, and we were driving really slow. My dad was driving, and I was like, man, we're driving really slow. And I looked over at him, and he had on also those sunglasses that you put over your glasses. And I just suddenly realized, I was like, oh, my dad's kind of like an old man driving too slow. And I love my dad. And so I just like, I think maybe like a car even passed us kind of fast, and part of what opened, I was like, and it just changed my orientation. And regularly, like, my kids even now start taking this on because I've said it out loud sometimes, because I get frustrated when people drive slow. And they started saying things like, well, they need to drive faster. And I was like, wow, I must be bringing this in somehow. And so I started saying, like, well, maybe they're, a little bit older and they feel uncomfortable and they, they're not sure where they are. But I actually changed this orientation where when they're slow drivers, I think to myself, I'm like, what if they're just like my dad, and they're like some nice old man or lady, and they just don't even know how slow they're driving. Even though, I don't know why this fills me with delight. But Flora, I'm glad you're enjoying it too. And Rita, I'm glad this resonates for you. And yeah, it is. It's like an equilibrium. And so it's funny because what's come from that sense of equilibrium is that I actually, like, I really feel what I would call happy most of the time. I hope, because again, sort of aggressively like positive people really grate on me. Like, I hope I'm not like aggressively happy. It's not my intention. And I don't have this experience of myself like I'm turning away from either kind of my own pain or the suffering of the world. But there's a part of me that just looks for the good. And I believe, again, even though I don't know that I set out to do this, I wanted to say it because I believe we can actually train ourselves to do this. And maybe I did it somewhat unconsciously, but is that just trying, like, I literally go like, I wonder, what good reason they might have for doing that. Or this woman got really mad at me. I was driving too slow the other day, apparently, because this woman like pulled up really close and she honked her horn. And I had an initial response that was like, get off my tail, lady. And then I was like, man, she must really need to be somewhere. And I think I sort of do that, because I was like, well, sometimes I really need to be somewhere, and I get frustrated when people are slow. And so I want to offer this piece of just looking like, well, why might they have done that? And it's not really to come up with an answer. It's actually just to change the orientation from like, man, they're being a dick to me, to look at this other human being stumbling through the world just like me. And then the other piece about this, and they're probably related, but there's a way they, or at least, pause for a second. So I actually know they're related. I'm just not quite sure like what the weave is, but is around, so in looking for the good in people, I wrote something down that I think is really smart, so I'm going to pull it up. So there's a couple things here that are important to me. So one is that I think most people think that this thing of like if I assume positive intention or if I look for the good, that means I have to be nice, or I have to like people, or I have to give up my own, like where I need to be or what I need. And I don't believe that's true. So I can go like, man, you know, she probably has somewhere to be, and I can just assume positive intention. And at the same time, I can be like, yeah, and I think I don't really want to be around her. And the two are not mutually exclusive. Like, I don't have to make her bad for me to need what I need. And mostly I see people falling to one side or the other, that either they have to be kind of right in order to get what they need and possibly make someone else wrong, or they think they have to give up their own needs. Like if they're like, well, this person isn't wrong, therefore I must be, or something, you know, I can't need what I need. And the thing that goes right along with that is that so there's this, it's a slightly different distinction, but it's like most people think that trusting their intuition is the same as trusting their thoughts and stories about people. So for me, this goes along with, I have a client who, one of the things she was sharing is that it's like she sees so much positive in people that she ignores, she'll ignore things, or she'll overlook pieces of data that are coming, like, right, information that's coming about them. She's made some sort of poor choices around dating recently. And I was like, I was sitting with this and I was thinking, okay, what is, because I really, like, I think I really see the best in people too, but I also trust me. So I trust that they're good, but I trust me, and I don't see those as opposed. So I walk through the world and I'm looking for, like, how are you good? And how are you good? And how is, like, all this good? Like, how is this good? But if something in me says, well, there's two pieces to this. So this is the intuition piece. Something in me says, like, you shouldn't be here. I trust that. Or I don't trust that person. I trust that. That doesn't mean they are untrustable. I just trust that I don't trust them. It's like a silly sentence. But those are really different things. So this piece is like that most people think that trusting their intuition is the same as trusting their thoughts and stories. So there's often the response is like, oh, if I don't trust them, already my mind is coming up with a story about why that's true. And most people think then that trusting their intuition is trusting that story that they made up. Well, it's because da-da-da-da-da, and I can tell da-da-da. That's just justification. And that's a place where we often look for some sort of validation to trust our intuition, rather than just going like, something says be here or don't be here, or go that way or don't go that way. And just trusting that, just being like, yeah, I don't even need to know why. And not getting caught, in fact, actively disbelieving our stories, but not disbelieving ourselves. So anytime you catch yourself justifying why you're right about how you feel, drop that. That's irrelevant. Well, I can't trust them because they da-da-da-da-da. It's like irrelevant, but actually trust the part of you that's saying, I don't want to do business with this person, without any justification for it. Or I don't want to commit to this person, or I don't want to have sex with this person. Like, you don't need justification for any of those things. And frankly, that's where you're going to get lost. So most of the time we'll create justification, and then we kind of know we're full of shit. And so we argue with our justification, which becomes mistrusting our intuition, when all we needed to do was actually trust the intuition and not need any story to back it up at all. So the other piece of this is the last piece I want to drop in here for this particular live, is, you know, as I go through life, kind of like assuming the best about people's weird choices in life, I don't ignore reality. And this is similar to trusting my intuition, but it goes along with this piece of, like, this woman who was saying, well, I see all the good things about them, so I ignore that he's broke. And now someone being broke doesn't mean anything necessarily, but what I think is happening there is that there's first of all, maybe not trusting intuition, but there's just ignoring reality. That's not seeing the good. Like, you can see the good and you could see reality at the same time. It's not our stories about reality, but it's like, oh, you know, maybe there is something like this person can't like functionally support their own life. It doesn't mean anything about them like as a person. And it might be that, like, hey, this isn't a great relationship choice for me right now. For, you know, anyway, these are like specifics, and there's your own specifics. If any of you who are here have one, these are the places where this comes in, is like that we see things like this person is always late. I can, you know, the part of like where I can get judgmental, or I can go like, gosh, you know, maybe they had a good place to be, or maybe this, that, and that. Like it doesn't really matter, but it's just like, wow, this person's always late. I don't think I want to make plans where then that impacts my life. Or there are these things that's like, see the good in people, don't ignore reality. Or trust like that life is happening, or that there's, you know, you can make something good out of any of it. There's good things happening in life, and trust your intuition without needing to follow the story about it. So I want to check in here a little bit with the comments before I sign off for today. I love hearing that, Flora. I get that sense about you too. There is like a looking for the positive piece. And Flora also said, I like that it's like you're the curious one looking at the world, like a kid looking at a book. Curious and interested in whatever's happening. Yeah, I mean, curiosity is a huge one, and that's been a big one for me too, is the sense of looking at the world with curiosity. Like, what's going on here? And sometimes even looking at it like, I don't even need to know, you know, but bringing curiosity inherently means that I don't know. Matthew said, I love it. Byron Katie always talks about looking within yourself to find where you have been the thing you dislike. It's always humbling, and I can always find something. Absolutely. I mean, I think that there's like lots and lots of work that can be done, you know, where we can follow these things and really get deep insights about ourselves. And then just like in those moments, right, when we're going to like flip off a driver, or we're going to, who knows, you know, all the things we like, take something personally or get mad, or in response, sometimes it's just in these moments, it's sort of like, oh, but, or I could just not. I mean, in some way it really feels like that choice, but I was trying to go a little deeper and look at how has that become the choice? And a big part of it is that sense of like, I don't know what's going on for them. And yeah, there are times when I'm not at my worst, and, you know, people see me talk to my kids, or who knows what, right? Like park right in front of the Muni bus. And so, yeah, beautiful. This piece from Dr. Strange, I'll take a moment, Ulysses, to check that out later. And Eva, it was just a drive-by, but sweet to see you. So yeah, beautiful to see all your faces. And I'm glad you like my term aggressively happy, Matthew. But I think maybe this is like my last holdout of, you know, some deep-seated judgment, but what's probably really most true about this is often I can't really connect with people when they seem just always good and positive and happy and on the bright side. And I'm like, I don't feel that way. So maybe we're not both human, or maybe I'm an alien. I think that's what I usually think. Like if you're human, then I must be an alien. But this is a piece, I want to keep working this. This is kind of like my first off the cuff thoughts about it. It was really just started really looking at this a few days ago. And, but I was really percolating on this feeling that I've come into a couple calls recently with colleagues where they've said, how are you? And I've just been like, I'm great. And I've been trying to look underneath it, like, why do I feel great most of the time? And this is the piece that's bubbling up for me around it, is like, without, to use my own phrase, without being like aggressively positive or happy, I really feel like I'm just going like, oh, this is looking like, where's the good? How is that person good? And a lot of it comes, and I cannot go into this because I'm going to jump off the call. This is where I always like end up on these tangents, but it puts me in the driver's seat. And it's not about control. Like, it doesn't put me in control of life, but it puts me in this place where I know that I can respond. And that is, someone else said equilibrium earlier easily, and that is like a place of like real equilibrium. Like, learning to surf isn't about controlling the ocean. It's knowing like, oh, how do I move? You know, knowing that I can actually respond to however the ocean shifts, and it'll be fun. Like, if you actually have ever caught a wave, I've only caught a few in my life, but like, it's the most exhilarating, and life kind of feels like that for me these days. So I love you all. I've got to run. And if you're watching the replay or you're here and you were madly trying to type a comment or a question as I'm signing off, like, I will definitely return and respond in text. Always appreciate your attention for any of you who are here. And I hope this serves in some way. Ciao.